All right, folks, welcome to Chapter 2 in Sports Nutrition, specifically bioenergetics. So, our goal today is to learn about how we're going to determine dietary needs. We're going to talk about, well, different government attempts that have occurred throughout the day to help people get an idea of how many calories they need, along with what food sources they should be gathering this from. We're going to talk about how you can read labels, the nonsense that occurs with health claims on labels, along with how we're going to figure out the basic needs for individuals, what we're considering essential and non-essential, and how we're going to define that. So when it comes to essentiality, we've got indispensable, which means there's no questions asked. We're always going to need it, along with dispensable, meaning, yeah, we don't really need it, like cocaine. And then we're going to have conditionally essential, meaning, well, you don't need that much protein, but if you are someone that's going to be exercising a whole lot, well, then it turns out you need to make sure that you're getting in enough. But if you're an average person, it's not the same, along with conditionally indispensable. So the same basic idea. If we happen to be an individual that is female, going through menarche, is incredibly physically active aerobically, we need to massively increase our iron intake because we know those individuals are going to be going through a lot more iron turnover, and they're going to risk anemia and other health considerations if they're not getting enough. So let's start off by talking about the RDA, which is simply our recommended daily allowance. This is literally how much we're going to need of a certain nutrient to avoid disease, okay? So if you look to the right, guys, we're going to see the basic chart between, we've got our estimated average requirement, meaning if the entire population takes in that amount of the vitamin or mineral, macronutrient, etc., and no more, 50% of the population would have some type of issue with inadequacy, but 50% would not. RDAs, on the other hand, are set up so that over 90% of the population should have no issues with anything that occurs with not having enough of that vitamin mineral. And then we have, if we keep going up even higher and higher, to what's known as the tolerable upper intake level, okay, sometimes referred to as the UL. Now, this is where once we go above this, we can have some issues with toxicity or otherwise. Certain things like your fat-soluble vitamins, you've got a slightly higher risk of it, but typically for a lot of things, it's very difficult to take in enough where you're going to hit this. But you can even die of water intoxication because you literally took in too much, and you'll have issues with toxicity. But once again, it's rare, and this graph is definitely not to scale, but it's more a thought exercise to understand what's going on. So with our RDAs, we're going to get our daily reference values, which is literally how much of it we should be taking in a given day. So examples, if we see the table 2.1, the goal is not to take in too much fat, much less saturated fat. And these are not well put together on research in certain areas. Along with, notice we want to take in massive amounts of carbohydrate, and we want to make sure we're getting enough fiber. Now, just because this is recommendations does not mean people follow it, and this is based on someone who needs 2,000 calories a day, which would be your average sedentary American, but obviously things are going to change rapidly depending on how physically active you are. Now, the government has made a number of different attempts. You guys are some of you might be old enough that you remember the old school pyramid that was literally pyramid building blocks, and we had things like the grain was the bottom, sweets were at the top. Some people thought since sweets are the top, they're the most important, America. And then other folks instead thought, well, grains are the most important thing because they're the bottom. Now they've switched it over to this My Pyramid and then working their way over to more of the My Plate, where you're going to look down and basically have a certain portion of your plate is occupied by vegetables, by grains, by proteins, by dairy, etc. This is all poorly done. It was done to the best of their ability. However, you got to keep in mind there are certain food groups that certain people aren't going to ever touch thanks to their own dietary decisions. And we're going to get into the motivations for that later on. But it's an attempt to make sure people are eating a variety. My major grievance with it is the fact that vegetables and fruits, specifically vegetables, don't occupy more space. Though, fun fact to the day for you guys is the original My Pyramid was almost a perfect example of what was the food production in America, hence why grains are pushed so hard and vegetables get the back burner, because who wants to be healthy? So, Obviously, with the guidelines for the new My Pyramid, we're trying to make sure people are being physically active while they're taking in an adequate amount of food, but not too much for what they're doing. We're eating a wide variety of foods that are high in nutrients, so hence we should go with our fruits and vegetables. With our whole wheat compared to normal wheat, they both suck, but there's a number of different grains that have got better micronutrient profiles, like quinoa and otherwise, but I'm not trying to get too pretentious here. Along with making good choices with the types of meat we eat, along with the types of dairy we consume. Typically, they're going to tell you to go low fat. I'm more of a proponent, we're going to learn, of not even really doing dairy at all, but that's going to be something we need to talk about in person. Oh, and probably not taking a lot of supplements and food additives, which also kind of naturally works against a lot of the grains. Yeehaw. Now, what's important is when we're going to read labels. The first thing we always want to start off with is the serving size. So literally, how much of this do we need to eat in order to be considered one serving? Breakfast cereals are one of the major culprits for having incredibly small serving sizes compared to how much people are typically going to put into and consider one serving. So one bowl of cereal typically is actually more like 4 servings. And then if you obviously have to 4x everything, it's going to make everything a lot more massive with the macros and micros. So after we figure out our serving size, then we're going to figure out how many calories we're getting per serving. And then we're going to look at our macronutrients, how many grams of fat, carbohydrates, and protein. We're going to see, does this actually meet with what our goals are, with our micronutrients? Are we getting enough of the vitamins and minerals that we're looking for? And then perhaps other interests of, let's look at those ingredients. Do you have somebody that has an allergy? Do you have someone that is trying to avoid certain ingredients for one reason or another, such as they're trying to go off legitimate sugar and refined sugars? Well, we want to look at and see what's put in there, along with ingredients are always listed in order of weight when it comes to our food choices. So if it says that, oh yes, there's flaxseed and there's chia seed, and if there is more salt in there, meaning salt comes up before on the ingredients than flaxseed, there is barely a dusting of flaxseed in the food that you're going to eat, and in reality, it's not having the same effects that you'd want to. Now, if we have someone that has some major food allergies, we should start off with the ingredients or the allergy warnings, because it doesn't matter how many calories are in it if they have a peanut allergy, and they can literally die from having an allergic reaction to peanuts because we didn't read the label. Now, we're going to find that different food choices are going to be higher in different nutrients. When in doubt, guys, meat. Okay, meat, specifically organ meats, followed by our vegetables, are going to be high in pretty much every single vitamin, mineral we're going to need. Okay, if you can eat organ meat, you're even better off. The thing I like about this, but also dislike, is certain things are in turn fortified. Like milk typically doesn't have vitamin A in it. It's fortified with vitamin A and D. Same thing with our cereals, is that those will be fortified with the different types of vitamins, which they were not in there to start. So you need to keep in mind with the food choices we're making, if you're actually looking to try and get in all of your vitamins and minerals via food choices, vegetables and meats is where it's at. Sorry guys, it's the fact of the matter, but it's important to understand how things can be misrepresented. Like, we're not going to eat sweets so we can get all of our vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin E. But sometimes folks are going to make some arguments that are relatively poor, but you are going to encounter them. Now, this should hopefully get a number of you guys upset, which is how we define different types of nutrient content claims. Notice we can say something is fat-free or trans fat-free if each serving has less than 0.5 grams of it. Meaning, if it has 0.4 grams of trans fat per serving, we can still say it's trans fat-free based to nutrient content claims. That's nonsense. Because once again, some food choices, that's why the servings are so incredibly low, so they don't have to report it. Because we're in America, we round everything to the 5 and the 0, so if it's low enough, we don't have to do it. Okay? Now, we then see, obviously, how we can say that something is low in something, along with something has been reduced, and also a couple other comments that can be allowed to put into it to tell us how it's modified. But keep in mind, guys, once again, they can round and in fact lie about how much of something is in there, and then they don't have to report it, which is where a lot of folks that are well-meaning, trying to avoid different nutrients for their own health, they are sometimes actually ingesting a decent amount of the exact same macronutrients they claim to be trying to avoid. Now, due to how much of certain types of macro and micronutrients occur, they can make claims about how foods are healthier for you, simply because there has been shown to be a link between calcium intake and osteoporosis. So if we have enough calcium, we tend to have a lower risk for osteoporosis. If we have too much sodium and you are sedentary, you increase your risk for hypertension. We can see that we do have a slight increased risk of certain cancers like colorectal thanks to our fat intake, but that is based on epidemiology, which is not a mechanistic study, along with this is essentially saying that the person that gets all their saturated fat from eating nothing but bacon, fried foods, and hot dogs is the same as someone that gets all their saturated fats from eating coconut oil, avocados, and let's just say wild-caught salmon. Not going to be the same physiology between the two, but that's how they all wash together whenever you look at large studies like that. So, take a look, understand that these claims can be made, but how these claims are definitely not perfect. Now, when it comes to processed food and food additives, okay, when we refer to something as been processed, this is how literally something has been treated so that it's going to be able to stay on the shelf longer, or is going to taste better, look better, etc. Now, processing is where we're going to be adding preservatives, perhaps dyes and food colorings, along with flavorings, fortifying and enriching, meaning that we're going to be adding in some type of vitamin, mineral, etc., dehydrating, you can know, and drying, along with freezing and along with smoking, because Lord knows a good smoker is worth it, but also has been shown to increase cancer risk. But hey, you know what? Barbecue's awesome. But keep in mind, these are ways that foods are going to be modified. Okay? Now, there are some concerns that thanks to how much foods have been processed, and actually we're going to talk about soil quality also in this class, we're not going to find as much micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals inside of foods as we would have in previous generations. There has been research that has shown this to a certain extent, along with the variability in soil. But at the end of the day, if you're doing a good job of avoiding foods that came from boxes and getting more things that grew from the ground or ate things that grew from the ground, you're probably going to be better off with overall your health. Then we have sweeteners, which people are going to put into drinks in order to make them low calorie or calorie free, along with fat substitutes like good old Olestra, which is still used and has been shown if you take even, I think it's only about 2 servings of Olestra, it will give you diarrhea, but people don't want fat. So yeah, just be careful with that stuff. That is how one can take a one-way ticket to disaster pants. Now, in order so we can see what's going on with someone's nutrition, we want to go ahead and be able to track them. Our best bet is going to be a 3-day followed by a 7-day dietary recall. So that way we can see what these folks are going to be what they're putting in their mouth, what's going on, and we can get more information. Now, surveys is just kind of asking you what you did, whereas if you actually weigh them, then we know exactly how many servings of that food and how many calories are going to go. 24-hour recalls and recalls in general have been shown to not be that accurate because, well, it turns out people are going to lie, along with they're going to make mistakes simply because some days you eat really well, some days you eat really poorly, and it's really the average that gets you. It's not going to be the one good day, much less the one bad day when it comes to most people in their diet. Now, frequency questionnaires at least give you an idea of what someone's doing frequently, but it turns out we can make a lot of sweeping statements without really fully understanding how someone typically eats. Along with doing a dietary history, this just gives you an idea of what's going on with how someone typically eats, but it's never going to be perfect. Most people are going to lie on their dietary intake, not because they're trying to, but because we're all naturally biased and we make mistakes. But most people are going to underreport how many calories they're taking in, from anywhere from 200 to 1,000 calories per day. And meaning they think they're on a 1,000 calorie a day diet trying to lose weight, And in reality, they're taking in 2,000 calories a day, and that's why they're not losing weight. And research has actually been showing that individuals that say that they weren't able to lose weight because of genetics or otherwise, well, when you actually look at their diet and you look at their physical activity, they overrank how much physical activity they're doing, and then they underrank how much nutrition they're taking in. And in reality, they're doing exactly what their body is showing them, is they're breaking even. So, thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.